Hi, I love therapy, and in fact, I've been going to therapy since I was around 6 years old. Though I talk about therapy a lot and may interview some therapists on the show on occasion, nothing that is said in this podcast should be considered a replacement for therapy. If you are struggling, I urge you to please seek guidance from a therapist because you are absolutely worth it. Hello, everyone. You are listening to Wine, Dine, and 69, a podcast about dating, relationships, sex, and self-love. I am your host, Rachel Dalton, and I had this intrusive thought to start this episode with what up, fuckers? But I contained myself, but clearly I didn't contain myself well enough to not share that I had the intrusive thought. But it's kind of not the vibe of the podcast, so you know what? Honestly, I stand by it. Hey everyone, how you doing? How's your summer? I'm back. I've been busy. I went to Europe, as I mentioned, to visit my partner's family and friends and see where he comes from, and that was awesome. I had so much fun. And we've just been very go ever since. So yeah, I feel like it's only been a few months, but I feel like so much has changed in my life. And, we're going to talk a little bit about that today in the intro. So let's get into it. First and foremost, I wanted to mention that I have been the guest on a couple of podcasts. One of them is called What's Your Weird Story? And I'm not sure when that will be coming out, but it will be coming out soon. I did that interview last week, and then I interviewed this week for something that is already out, and the podcast is called The Kid and Friends Podcast. And both really cool experiences, different experiences, kind of touched on some similar things, some different things, but I really enjoyed it. And as I said in the interview that I did this week, talking to guys is always different because I feel like the ratio of podcast guests on this show is definitely skews more towards female. So yeah, it's just kind of nice to talk to different kinds of people, get a different perspective, and to talk openly about things that are kind of taboo. So I will link those podcasts in the episode notes. Okay, so one of the things that I've been exploring for the last few years really has been values. And I can't talk in a ton of detail about the undertones of what's happening in my personal life quite yet in terms of values, but I'm figuring some things out. I'm figuring out that with my partner being from Europe, I want to spend more time there with his family. I'm figuring out that my time is precious, and I want to do things with my time that really bring me a lot of joy. And I also have been thinking a lot about the fact of how much I've changed in the last few years from when I started this podcast. When I started this podcast, I was in a relationship that, even though I was convinced it was a really, really good relationship, it wasn't. I was living with a roommate. We were in the middle of the pandemic. So much has shifted in the last 4 years. The 4-year anniversary of the podcast was on August 14th. So yeah, it's been wild. And one of the things that I've been considering is just how those changes have affected me in the ways that I spend my time. So I'm not going to beat around the bush. I'll cut right to the point. This fall, I'm only going to be releasing one episode a month. I'm doing some reevaluating in my life in terms of these values that I'm talking about and how I want to spend my time. And I feel like I don't have the capacity right now, even though I have really, really good conversations. I feel like I don't have the capacity to bring you the full content that I want in the way that I want. And my energy needs to be elsewhere right now. It needs to be on other areas of my life. And so I'm going to be, and I'm not sure what that means. I'm not sure what that means in terms of what the podcast will be going forward. In an ideal world, maybe a year from now, I would be able to just have the conversations and hire somebody to do the editing and marketing, which is my absolute least favorite part. Or who knows, it's something that I might stop doing altogether. I know that I have a good product. I know that product, like I'm in marketing. I'm definitely not in marketing. I know that I have good conversations and that they can help people, but I'm not sure that they're reaching the right people right now, to be honest with you. So I need to take a pause. I need to take a break, and kind of get a sense of how these values align. Another thing that I've been thinking a lot about is that when I started this podcast, theater wasn't an option, and theater is my first love. Musical theater always has been, always will be. And the relationship I was in, I was also encouraged to stop pursuing that thing that made me happy. I don't think that that's how he viewed it, but that's kind of like, I kind of got the sense that he didn't think that it was super cool or worth my time if I wasn't getting paid for it. So I took that and I was like, I'm not doing theater anymore, which was just the biggest betrayal of self that I could possibly do. And so, I started the podcast as this other creative outlet, and, theater wasn't a thing during the pandemic. It really couldn't be. And so the podcast kind of replaced that. In the time since, I have gotten back involved in theater. I have a group of really great theater friends, and it brings me so much joy, so much happiness, and I want to continue doing it. So that's one of the things that I'm weighing. There's some other things here and there, all having to do with values and my time being valuable and how I want to live my life, as I get older through the years. And who knows? I think that I'm just really embracing the idea that I do not need to know. And I'm being honest with you here because I don't know. I always think, though, that I have to have things like so figured out. And right now, one of the things that I'm embracing is that this is a season of transition. This is a season, I called it my coda season also. Yeah, I'm working through a lot of things in therapy, and that has to take priority. My friends and family and my partner have to take priority. And figuring some of these other things out, regarding values and how I want to spend my time also need to be a priority. So, it's funny. It kind of reminds me, I'm super into ASMR. And there's this ASMR artist, I think her name was ASMR Loa. And, she made a video years ago saying, I'm going to be taking a break from making content, blah, blah, blah. And then she came back after like 7 years. So you never know. And I'm not saying that I'm not going to be doing the podcast. That's not what I'm saying. I'll let you know if that changes, but that's not what I'm saying right now. I'm not the type of person who's just going to like drop off and you're never going to hear from me again. I'm going to keep you in the loop. But long story long, so for now, I just need to put less pressure on myself regarding the podcast. So for these episodes, I'm going to release them once a month. They're not really going to be on a schedule. It's kind of going to be when I have the bandwidth. I already have the conversations lined up. So it's, doing the editing and the posting and the marketing, all my least favorite parts. I probably will not edit them as heavily. It's just going to be authentic, and it is what it is because it's what I can give right now. So things are shifting for me. It's all good for the most part. I just kind of need to figure some things out. So that's where we are now, today, as of this moment. Wow, that was actually way more succinct than I was thinking it was going to be. I thought I was going to blather on for like 15 minutes about value shifting and blah, blah, blah. But too long didn't read. There's a lot going on in my life right now. It's kind of a theme of value shifting, and I need to take a step back from the podcast. That doesn't mean I'm ending it, but I need to take a step back and reevaluate some things. That was still kind of long. Anyway, okay, let's get into the meat of the episode, as it were. My guest today is Jenny, and she and I have a fantastic conversation about self-love rituals. She talks about her story of how she learned to invest in herself and value and see herself as worthy, and kind of crawled her way up and out from a kind of dark place. So we get into that, and we talk about what self-love is and how, again, kind of acceptance of where you are, which is funny because that's kind of, See what I did? Acceptance of where you are presently without any judgment is kind of what self-love, a big part of self-love is. Like I've said before, it always seems like these episodes come at the perfect time, that I'm always interviewing the perfect person at the right time, because I've been doing a lot of shifting in terms of my self-love practices, because I'm really, really trying to make sure that I know that I'm worthy of this love and attention. So, after coming back from Europe, we ate a lot of really, really, really good food, but I think I gained like 5 pounds. So we came back and we've been way more focused on healthy eating. That doesn't mean that, we don't sometimes have little treats. We ordered pizza last night, but yeah, I'm eating a lot of salad, I'm drinking less, and I'm feeling a difference. So that's been really, really good. One of the other things I've been doing has been using a self-care app called Finch. And it's funny because it's this little like bird that I take care of, right? And it lives its little life, and these different habits, like, making sure that you floss, make your bed every morning, take your medicine, all the things that you need to do on like a daily basis, you get different energy points. Your bird gets little energy points. And, it's kind of funny that like I can't really take care of myself for myself, but as soon as there's another being in the picture that I have to take care of, I all of a sudden get really, really good at flossing. So yeah, Finch has been really, really cool. I'm enjoying it, so I'll put that in the episode notes so you can check it out. Another thing I've been doing has been this somatic program called the Workout Witch. People have been listening for a while might remember that I was doing some somatic training earlier in the year, working through a workbook, just to kind of get more in touch with my body, and just get a better sense of things, because, realizing that I just haven't been very connected to my body for most of my life. So one of the things that I've been doing is this program. I think I'm on day like 11 or 12 right now. It's called the Workout Witch, and I'm doing a program that is about hip release with pelvic floor, and also shoulders, neck, and jaw release. So it's kind of a way to help like release trauma. And I do have to say, I like the ritual of doing it every day. And I do feel more loose overall, just way more loose. And I think it's a mix of a lot of these little self-care habits that I'm doing. So, it's funny that I have this guest who's coming on to talk about the rituals of self-love. And that's something that I've been getting a lot better at these days as well. So, I think I'm going to end with, at the end of this episode, I asked Jenny, this is a little bit of a spoiler alert, what would you say to somebody who's struggling with self-love? And she said, I would ask them a question. And the question basically boils down to, do you feel that you're not worthy of self-love? And I was nodding so emphatically, because there is a sticky note on my computer, which is where I was recording. I wasn't recording from bed this time. I have a desk now. There's a sticky note that I keep on my computer at my desk that is a quote by Adia Gooden. And the quote is, "What would you do if you knew that you were already worthy? What would you stop doing?" And so when she asked that question, I was just like, yes, because that's what it comes down to. It's self-love is about being worthy of taking care of yourself. And you might remember that my word for 2024 is worthy. So it's all coming together. Values, worth, self-love. These are all my favorite things. I think that's all I got. I'll see you guys next month. I'm sure I'll have lots of updates at that point. I'll keep you posted on how things are progressing here. But in the meantime, I'm going to cut to a quick commercial break, and then please enjoy my lovely conversation with Jenny.
Broken, a tragic romance game by Apon Games, is a storytelling game of tragic romance for 2 players about broken objects and broken hearts. Together, you and your play partner will create 2 characters in a relationship, and over the course of 10 scenes, you will explore the ways in which the things you loved about each other crack, until everything about your relationship is broken. including 10 real-life physical objects you will break over the game's 10 scenes. In Broken, the relationship will always end. Although the tragic conclusion is inevitable, there is endless potential for healing and self-discovery along the way. Broken is an emotionally deep game that explores themes of memory, identity, and loss. Broken is also full of empathy building, hope, and healing. It recreates the raw, visceral experience of going through a breakup, along with the catharsis of smashing objects, all while telling a beautiful story along the way. Get your copy of the Broken ebook edition now by going to bit.ly/brokengame. That's bit.ly/brokengame, or head to apongames.com, APON games.com today.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back. I am thrilled to introduce my guest today. I have Jenny with me here. Jenny, how are you doing?
Good. Thank you for having me, and thank you for spending time with me today.
I am very excited because this is a topic that is near and dear to my heart, self-love.
Absolutely.
And I think that all of us could do with a little more of this. But before we kind of get into that, I find that a really good jumping off point is just give me your little bio. Tell me about you, where you came from, what you do, how you came to be here. Can be as long, it could start in childhood, or it can, start last week, whatever you want.
Oh yeah. I mean, definitely, this right now, currently, I help women, specifically in Latinas because I am Latin. But I help all women find their identity and voice through rituals, self-love practices, and break generational curses or patterns. And for me, it all started with, my husband being in the military. He joined very early. We were young babies, about 19, 20 years old. But even before then, I had my childhood traumas, and I grew up pretty rough. My mom was a single mother of 3 girls. I was the oldest, and she was always putting us first, right? And she was always being a mom and a dad, right? And she was always grinding and working and sacrificing a lot of parts of her. And we grew up, and it led me to feel not like myself. I felt like there was something missing, right? Because in society, we're told, go to college and do all these things. But the more I did these things, the more internally I felt so voided. And, I grew up, my husband joined the military. At the time, he was my boyfriend. And we got married very young, and going through the military lifestyle, I found myself even more depressed, and I dealt with depression and anxiety growing up as a child, growing up consistently, even in adulthood. And the more I grew up, the more it really affected my life. Not only myself, but the relationships around me, my husband and I, who I was, how I saw myself. And it led me to a lot of drinking. In the military culture, Rachel, I don't know if you know anything about it, but
A little bit.
it's very, I would say it's a toxic environment.
Totally.
It totally is. It's a lot of ego, right? Imbalanced masculinity, a lot of macho man type stuff, but also in the spouses, it's a lot of mental abuse, physical abuse. I've heard, so much negative vibrations. They're very
Sure.
low vibrations, and it caused me to drink a lot. And then we started to revolve around drinking. Like, our life revolved around that. And then from there, I caught myself in just even more depression. And every time my husband would leave on deployments, it would get worse. It would get worse. And because now I feel like, a part of me, or all of me really, because I don't know who I was at the time, how that came about. So going through this journey, it was rough. It was a very rough thing. I learned so much now about it, but that was my season of pain. That was my season of a lot of things were coming up, a lot of triggers, like I was not in control. And then I made me realize, when is this enough? There was a moment that I wasn't working at the time because it's really challenging to keep a job in the military, but there was a time I was sitting in my living room, and this was like kind of my line to the sand moment. This was my moment of like, enough. Like, this
That
is
Rubicon moment, yeah.
Yeah, and honestly, it made me think, like, we only had like, I don't know, $150 in our bank account because we drank our money away. We sucked at managing our money. We drank so much that it was like, we would drop like $500 here, like just crazy amount. And we only had $150 to our name. And I remember I saw this ad on social, and it was just hitting all of my pain points. And it was just like, completely, I didn't care what it was at that time, because he was the person on the ad was just targeting all of my pain points, that I became so desperate in learning more, and how that person could solve my issues, right? So I became so obsessed. So it was $99, and I remember this because it was my line in the sand moment. It was $99, and I knew my husband would not approve. He's like, hell no. Like, we only had $50 left after this. Like, absolutely not. You're like, no. So I didn't even ask him. I just swiped my card, and I remember, like, I did it, and he lost it. Like, he was just losing it. And I was like, I'm done. And to me, that was it. Like, that was my first time I've ever invested in myself.
I was literally going to say that word. You decided to literally invest in yourself. It was
really
worth it.
was. It was worth it. And it's funny because I don't remember what specifically. It was like affiliate marketing, and it started with that. And I remember, like, thinking to myself, we never were taught to invest in ourselves. Like, growing up for me, that was not a thing, and nor was it a thing of like health or like wanting to invest in yourself. And it led me down I know we'll talk about this later in the podcast, but it led me to really think of all these dark moments that I've been going through in my life, and how I was just playing the victim that whole time. How I was not in a growth mindset at all, that life is happening to me, not for me. And I have no luck. And the stories I kept telling myself over and over again. And this was my fate almost. This was my life. This is just all pain. And I was attracting more and more of the suffering. There's this saying that says, like, you go through hell, right? You're going through hell. Why stop there? Like, why continue? If you know it's a shitty place to be, why stop there? And that's what I was doing. I kept continuing to stop in hell, when I should have picked myself back up and continued on my journey. And it was just this vicious negative cycle of depression, anxiety. I got into a fight. I went to jail one time. It was crazy. And when do I take accountability for me? When do I control my life? And it led me to start being fascinated with understanding myself. And years, my husband got out of the military, years go by, and I'm still to this day presently working on that. And now I feel more powerful than ever. I'm internally more balanced. I think that this journey is always a growing, evolving thing. So I don't think that it's ever going to be perfect. But I do truly believe I am not that identity anymore. And that's where it led me. It led me to, I need to know what depression is. I need to know what anxiety is. What is that? Where do I get that from? How did that even form? Where did, like, all of this? So I started learning about
You
these
got
things.
curious. Yeah.
I got so curious, and it became to the point that I was like, I need to learn more. And I became obsessed with it. And it was like, I need to know. So how I could fix this. I'd go to the doctors, and the doctors would just shove pills down my throat. And I remember one time the doctor, and this was the Navy doctor, but she said, "Oh, well, I'll give you some antidepressants, right?" And then she said to me, because I looked really sad, and she's like, "Don't worry, honey. 80 to 90% of Americans are on an antidepressant." And I looked at her and I said, "And you think that's normal? You think that's
Mm-hmm.
okay?" And that moment, I did not even say anything. I just walked out. I just walked out because I'm like, I've been on so many antidepressants before. It doesn't fill the void, because what's happening there is you're looking for outside validation, and you're not fixing. It's like putting a Band-Aid on a wound that needs stitches.
Totally.
And it's like not going to do the same service. So I just said, you know what? I'm going to just take it into my own hands. I'm going to learn about what I need to learn. Why am I feeling this pain? Why am I feeling, so unworthy? Why am I, and it made me realize that so much people are going through this, that you're not alone in this. And it made me even crave more, that I could, and today I truly, truly believe that I could heal the world through
Mm.
us coming together, like you and me right now.
Yeah. And, I do think, medication has its place, of course,
Mhm.
obviously. But I think you bring up a great point that you can't just like slap the medication Band-Aid on and say, okay, like that'll fix it. Medication can enhance a journey that you're already on, but you have to be willing to take that journey.
Mhm. Yep.
Right.
Yep. Absolutely. And medication is needed for, life or death situations.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, if you have a severe UTI that you need some medication, antibiotics, absolutely. But I think in today's society, we're running to doctors for everything because we believe that it's their responsibility to keep us healthy. And their responsibility is just to keep us alive.
Right.
It's our responsibility to keep our health, right? To keep our balance, it's our. So once I stopped looking for that, because that was what I grew up with. I feel like that's how society is. It's like, if something's wrong, go to the doctors. But in reality, it's such a false information. The doctors are there to, again, surgeries, keep you alive, those type of things, where those extremes are needed. Those medicines are needed, absolutely. But it's our responsibility as our self, right? As source, to have balanced health, have a balanced mindset. And there's support out there, obviously, life coaches, therapists, things like that. But let's try first. I think people forgot to try first,
Yeah.
And I think that leads to a lot of other traumas. It leads to other outside validation, acceptance, that people feel so internally voided, and they,
Absolutely.
yeah.
No, you said something kind of when you were going over your story that I was like, oh, that's interesting. And I kind of, share as much as or as little as you want. But you were in these unhealthy habits with your now husband by your side.
Mm.
And then you made the decision to invest in yourself. How did that journey translate to him? Like, did he at that moment also go, okay, you're right, I'm also going to invest in myself? Was there any, like, because I see that a lot in relationships where one person decides, all right, I'm going to start taking care of this. I'm going to take care of this. And then the other person can feel left behind, or they can feel more comfortable being stuck in those old patterns, etc.
Oh, I love that. I love that. No, Rachel, he was super toxic. He was completely emotionally imbalanced. His masculine was completely broken. His ego was in charge. His feminine side was not there, because he was never not taught that. We were actually very toxic to each other, Rachel. And it's funny because I'm still married to my husband, Nick, and people think in relationships, You don't know what you don't know, one. And two, what you were taught, you think it's like the Bible, right? Where you were taught is your core belief, right? And it's funny because at that time, Rachel, he lost it. Like he just completely threw a childish tantrum and was not understanding. But then it wasn't that moment that happened, Rachel. In reality, it was my consistency of showing up for
Mm-hmm.
that thing that happened, where he said, wow, now you're inspiring me. What is happening to you? I saw you depressed. I saw you completely degrade yourself, have no boundaries with people, let people walk all over you, a people pleaser. I've seen you have anxiety attacks. I've seen you through all of these things. And now my energy completely was shifting. And now it's like, this is not the woman I married. What is happening? So even to this day, I'm married to my husband, and we are two completely different people than we were, and we were high school sweethearts. So
Okay.
yeah, it was a journey for us, Rachel. And I think in our relationship specifically, we grew together, and there was so many times where we were growing apart, so many times. And I think what really kind of saved us is my communication skills of like, hey, this is not working. We didn't even know we were in a toxic relationship until I learned that there was toxic relationships. Like, this
Mm-hmm.
is how low we were, that we're like, we are toxic to each other. And this is not okay. This is not healthy, because growing up, my mother was divorced several times. Men didn't show up for us. And especially in the Latin culture, Rachel, men don't show up. They don't, not only do they not show up, but they create traumas and things that women suffer through from
Was
men.
that machismo culture, right?
Yes. I'm Puerto Rican, but I know a lot of Latin I mean, all women go through this. I'm not just saying, I'm just more with me. I'm Latin, and I've seen this so much in our culture
Absolutely.
of
I hear
like
you.
completely just degrading women, emotional abuse, narcissistic abuse, physical abuse, sexual assaults, a lot of things that women go through with men. And I think, and we'll talk about this more later, but in our relationship, we were carrying those traumas. And
So that's what you mean by generational.
yes,
I
that's what I
see.
mean by generational. When it comes to generational traumas or curses or patterns, whatever you would like to call them, this is the behaviors that happen even in the more what you see growing up. And in my case, my mother's experiences, men were not reliable.
Mm-hmm.
Men were not safe. Men were not, they wouldn't show up, right? They wouldn't, to me, it was pain. Men equaled pain. And for me, I was actually carrying that in my relationship, and I had no freaking idea because I didn't know
Yeah.
about it.
Well, it's like you had to learn how to teach someone how to treat you in a different way, and he had to learn how to,
Yeah.
you know.
And we loved each other, and we still passionately, deeply, our love is very strong. But you know that saying when they say love is not enough?
Oh yeah.
It's like there is a behavioral change in the way we treat each other. And I think, him growing up in a Italian family, his father as well being broken masculine energy. His father went through a lot of traumas, a lot of not the greatest childhood. And when you start as that's what you see. And guess what? Now your belief system is different, right?
Right.
It's the same. And now the things that you don't want to pass down to your kids, you're going to pass them down through your behaviors.
Absolutely. 1000%.
And because children see what they see, and they're very observant, analytic. And how you treat people and their behaves and things like that. So for me in our relationship, Rachel, to answer your question, it's we we had to grow, and there was a lot of growing pains. A lot of times where we almost got divorced several times where we were separated, and we're like, I can't do this anymore. And we didn't know how to change it, Rachel. We didn't know, but we loved each other so passionately. We did. We truly loved each other. It was more of, what is wrong here? I don't understand. We were taught that love is enough, but is it? And because we keep going through this negative cycle. So from that point on, he saw change in me, which made him change. So I think for me, I had to change myself to be an inspiration to him.
Totally.
And even to this day, now he like, the more I break through my business and break through all of these things, he's impressed, and not in a way that he puts me on a pedestal, but in a way that he's like, wow, I have seen you from going to jail, right, for a fight, to I've seen you depressed, lose weight, gain weight, massive anxiety attacks, not stable emotionally, to this person you are today. It's the most inspiring thing. And I think when we start focusing, Rachel, on ourselves in a relationship and stop pointing fingers at our spouse,
Yep.
that's when change truly happens.
I agree. I absolutely agree.
Yeah. And that was that moment. I mean, it was years. It took time. It took effort. It took a lot of communication, from that point on, of doing that $99 and saying, this is it.
I'm
feel
investing
it
in myself.
Yes, I'm invested. I'm tired of living this way. This is not life. This cannot be it. This cannot be it. And that was it. And from there, I just started learning and growing, and I didn't really even care if he was there or not at that point. I was just so like deeply in me, of healing me, that I knew deep down, and when I heal myself, then I could give to Nick.
Yes, absolutely.
And it led me to really think about, wow, how can this happen? Like, how is this a thing? How is this energy? Like, I was more calm, he was more calm. It was such a magical thing. And I think people underestimate, when you heal yourself, when you're a sense of peace, how people open up. Now, Rachel, oh my God, people open up to me. I'm just a stranger, in a grocery store, and they just come up to me.
Yeah,
Just
I have
talking to me about
experiences like
their
that too.
traumas.
Yeah.
And it's just like, whoa, like, how can that be? They don't even know me from a hole in the wall.
Well, people sense energy.
Exactly. So, and I think in our relationship, that's what had to happen, is I had to change my energy.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And one of the many ways in which you did that, I mean, it sounds like it started small and then it moved out from there, but self-love and getting really introspective and curious about self was a really important part of that. So, like, what did you in that period learn about self-love, like what it was, and how did you practice it?
Well, self-love, I think, is a true key foundation to the healing journey. I think that people don't really understand what true self-love is. I think, we see that word getting thrown out, and it's like, oh, self-love. And I don't think people realize the actual definition of self-love. I think that is definitely the foundation. Self-acceptance, transformation, growth, things like that. But I think for me, through self-love, it's a practice. It's a practice. It's the acknowledging the pain, acknowledging the traumas, facing them, and knowing that it's gonna hurt. It's gonna be a painful process. But suppressing them and ignoring them is just not the way. And that's what I was doing those so many years. By loving myself, I created space for these feelings to surface. I gave myself the space to feel them. What I learned, Rachel, was that I wasn't allowing myself to not only feel the emotions, I was asking and telling myself the wrong story and questions to myself.
It's so funny. I always find that the guests that I have on like match up perfectly with what, I'm experiencing in my own life. Like it's just everything that you're saying is similar to what I've been experiencing over this past year, which is, I repressed a lot of these traumas that happened in my 20s. And then I ended up in the hospital because I was a mess. I had a nervous breakdown.
Yeah.
And then very slowly it's been like, all right, I'm going to go back to therapy. I'm going to get EMDR. I'm going to do all of these things and I'm going to develop good habits and learn how to untangle this mess of trauma, like back to basics, right? Like let's untangle. I likened it to like a closet of like shit. And like your mom says, clean your room before you can go out with your friends, and you don't want to clean your room. So you just throw everything in the closet, and the pile behind the closet gets bigger and bigger and compounds and compounds. And finally, one day you have to take everything out of the closet, start sorting it into boxes and dealing with it.
Absolutely. And it's the most, and people don't do it. It's so terrifying for people to do that is because they're so terrified. It's fear controlling them.
Totally.
And it's saying, well, who am I without this pain? Who am I? What is my identity? Who the heck am I? And because they're more fearful of not really the pain, it's after the pain is cleansed. To be honest, you become so addicted to the traumas, the pain, that you actually grow an identity around it. And without that, who are you? That's what people are really actually, through all my clients and all my experiences, that is the source. And when you're able to fix the stories you're telling yourself, when you're able to fix, well, let's create a newer identity for you. The thing is, it's so scary and painful because your fear, your survival instinct, your fight or flight is actually telling you, hell no. Your ego is saying, no, I'm not dying, because your old version has to die. And through that pain, that is where the ego is like, no. If you do this, I'm dead. And you can't do that. That's not safe for you. But it's actually not safe for the ego.
Right.
It's actually not your true self. You weren't born to be that terrified. When you were born, the little kids walk, they bust their little butts, and they get back up and they try again walking. That's the true you, the one that's consistent, the one that keeps coming up. But there's a moment in our life that we fall and we forget that we have to choose to get back up. A lot of people forget that their identity, you can change your identity. But we have to let go of those traumas. And I think self-love for me was just that, accepting where I am, accepting that this is just a part of my journey and I have to feel these, but also accepting, forgiving myself.
Oh, that's been so vital for me too. I can totally understand that.
Yeah, it's forgiving yourself, giving yourself the grace. Giving yourself, you didn't know what you didn't know, Rachel. You didn't know what you didn't know, Jenny, and saying, well, now that I'm aware, that's the step. That's the most powerful. Awareness. Now you know that you're aware of this pain. Well, then how do I let it go? That's where people get stuck and they're like, I don't know what to do. I've tried. But then I have conversations with my clients, and their belief system is just all pointing to that self-talk. And all it is your belief system. Your belief system is so strong. And the thing is, I always say, if that's what you, and because it's hard to change an adult's mindset.
Oh, totally. It's ingrained. It's patterns. Yeah.
It is. And when you say, to, I just have bad luck. Let's just say that I have bad luck. I'm just never gonna have a happy life. If you believe that, the first thing I always say is that something that is gaining? Are you gaining something, or is that adding value to you, or is it taking it away? And people, my clients, they just start crying and they're like, oh my gosh, this whole time I've been sabotaging myself. Your belief system is how you react. When you're traumatized, it's coming from a place of reacting, not responding. And there's a big difference. Reacting is coming from a place of trauma, of a trigger. It's a trigger for you. Something happens, you instantly trigger. It's your defense mechanism, your survival instinct. It's not coming from your true source.
Well, that's the basis of the body keeps the score, right? Bessel van der Kolk.
Yes.
Trauma comes back as a reaction,
It
not
does.
a memory.
So it's an instant reaction. It's a trigger. The goal is to come from a place of responding, because your responding source is your clear thinking brain, your intuition, your authenticity, your true self. I'm not saying you're not going to get pissed off about something. That is not what I'm saying, because it still does happen. It's more of, why did this piss me off?
And being able to analyze that emotion.
Exactly. And this is where journaling comes into play. People think that, in society we were told, or even growing up, it has to be such an impactful, big thing for you to change your life. You have to move, or you have to become rich, or whatever. It's big things, big events. But it's so false. It's so false. It's actually in the small things, your daily behaviors, your rituals, your self-love practices, that will get you to where you want to go.
I love that.
Through that self-love, like we were talking about, like, you have to set boundaries, healthy boundaries, with the relationships you're in, and you have to learn how to protect your energy. And I had to learn that. I was a people pleaser, completely would give when I didn't have anything to give, and it led me to burnout, anxiety attacks. It completely drained me in all levels. And that's how it showed up in my health, in my relationships, in my physical health, everything I cared for. That's how it spread. And I had to distance myself from any toxic relationships, or cut them off completely. And your environment as well, who you hang out with is very critical. And a lot of people know this. But the thing is, don't you see people know this and they still continue to hang out with these people? It's because what happens there, and I had to go through this, they're afraid if this person leaves, I'm nothing. Back to outside validation. I don't want them to leave, because even though that person's toxic to them, even though they go back, because again, back to identity, they believe that if that friend or family member leaves, they don't know who they will be. They think they're going to feel alone.
They define themselves through the context of their relationship with the other person.
Yes. There's a lot of that happening. And through my self-love, going through, like, sitting, like, how we schedule things like this, we schedule stuff. We need to start scheduling self-care the same way.
Totally.
The same exact way. And knowing you as a person. And there's this really fascinating philosophy, this Japanese philosophy that I live by. It's called Ikigai, Japanese philosophy. And there's 4 elements. The first one is self-understanding. And the second one is what gives you joy, what makes you happy, right? And the third one is what can you do with that that you enjoy. And then the last one is, how can you serve the world? How can you give it to the world? And a lot of people want step 4, but they don't know step 1, self-understanding.
Right.
You can't hop from one to another. You have to, and I think the 4 critical parts of this, self-understanding is gonna probably be the most heaviest part. And it could take months, it could take years. I mean, it's taken me many years to get where I am today. And, when the more I still, till this day, I lean into, ooh, that came up for me. Why? What am I holding on to there? The more you practice that, the more easier it is just like waking up or brushing your teeth, or it becomes second nature. For you to change the self-love practices and to put that in your life, you have to substitute and know what timing you're doing. I hear so much, I don't have time for that. You don't have time, or it's not a priority for you.
Right. And priority shift, that's okay. We were talking about that before we started recording, actually.
Yeah. And knowing what needs, our journey, Rachel, it's always flowing. It's always changing, evolving, right? It's just how you listen to your intuition to get alignment. Even asking from advice from someone else. That's okay to ask for advice and help, but also take time to listen to you. Sit with yourself. Think about, well, let me clear all these noises, all these things that I should do, or let me clean that out. Let me sit with myself and hear what my intuition is saying, what my guide is saying.
See, I just never know if it's my guide or my anxiety.
Yeah. And for you to really see that, I feel like meditation comes into play, because I had massive anxiety. And it's funny, Rachel, because just recently, I would say not even a month ago, I had an anxiety attack. And what's crazy is that I haven't had one in maybe over 5 years.
Oh, wow.
And it's funny because knowing what I know now, my husband and I, like I told you earlier, we had a toxic relationship. Now we are loving, we're very balanced, we're 2 different people, and we're more in love now. But at that time, there's still triggers that come up for me. So it's funny because there was a time that he said something and it completely triggered a past trauma that I had with him. And I started hyperventilating, and I started freaking out because in my brain, instantly it's saying, you're not safe, right? You're not safe. He's gonna emotionally abuse you, all these things, and then all of a sudden you're no longer in control of your body. And what's crazy is, while my body was freaking out, in my brain I was so calm, Rachel. It was like if I was seeing myself going through these triggers, and I knew this was just a trauma that now I have to face. And people think through your journey it's going to be you skipping and dancing all the time and singing and just this positive
Face
energy.
masks and
Yeah,
yoga. Yeah.
it's just not that way. It's more of awareness. It's when you awaken, it's actually more painful than anything. And I'm not going to lie to you or your audience, but it's the best thing you will do for yourself. Because I noticed at that moment that it wasn't me, having this, it was a nervous system. We hold negative energy in our body, and we hold these traumas. And my husband, he knew how to handle it already now, but he knew he had to just let me get it out. And completely, me being upset and just I know how to calm my nervous system now. And what I say is, Jenny, you're safe. You are okay. This is something in the past. And him reassuring me as well, saying, Jenny, that's not me anymore. No
Mm-hmm.
longer. And consistently being there, saying those things where now we could relax ourselves. And
Absolutely.
now, and that is that's repetition though. That's not just a one time and that's it.
Well, you're rewiring your nervous system.
Exactly. It's a reset. It's a reset button. Knowing what we do after, and then after we had a conversation and, how he can help, how I could support you because I created that trauma. How can I overcome and help you through this trauma? And to me, that made our relationship stronger. And it completely rewired my nervous system, even in that moment, because I already knew the next time that happens, what to expect from him.
That's a good point.
And what to expect from myself as well. When traumas and triggers come up, people think it's let me say it like this. We were not taught to say, ooh, this is coming up. Let me feel it now because I'm safe enough to do it. There's hasn't been a lot of safe spaces for people to do that. And I believe that, facing those traumas it's painful, but it's necessary. It's a root foundation and that's where the self-love practice comes in. Taking time to journal, to meditate, to what came up for me. We do this practice, Nick and I, every night. We put the kids to bed, we set our mood of our room, put candles on, whatever it may be, and we ask each other, what came up for you today? And before, my husband he didn't even know what he was feeling at all, ever. He was just on autopilot 99% of the time. Now we could sit with each other and express to each other what really truly came up for us that day.
Yeah, that's pretty incredible.
It is, and it's something that it has made us more connected because we know what we're facing each other and we're there to support each other and we're there to say, well, why did that come up for you?
And you know that person's your teammate and is not going to necessarily be a trigger.
Exactly. And that's where our new identities come in, right? The new highest version of us is that. The old one is all the traumas, all the toxic relationship. And we chose to stay together and say, how can we fix this? Because it's not the love that it's lacked. And we want to give each other 100%. We don't know how. And to me, that's worth saving in a relationship. If that person wants to give you 100%, they just don't know how. And I don't know how. Well, let's find out together.
I love that.
And
it's that desire to make the effort.
Yeah, it really is, to make the effort. Now, if the other person's giving 20% and you're giving 100,
right.
then I don't think that's something, you could pursue, but because you can't. I mean, in reality, the person does have to give 100 efforts, truly, energetically. That happens so much in relationships because I deal with a lot of relationship questions as well, Rachel, and it's the same thing. It's, well, did you communicate that with your spouse? And it's like, no. Well, we need to start with communication skills first then, because what happens if your partner does truly care, but doesn't know what's happening? You're assuming that they know.
Right.
And yeah, that's what led me to the self-love is setting boundaries with my family members too. In a Latina culture, it was very toxic, very obedient, very what elderly say go, like that's it. And it's just, no, let me being okay with, let me be the black sheep of my family. Set the example of that. And I mean, the change that I have seen in my family is just through my energy, my change. My mother and I have one of the best relationships we've ever had. She's going through her awakening process and journey, and I never thought that would happen. my in-laws, we all have in-law challenges. I mean, they're even like changing, and just through me setting the energy.
You lit a match in everyone. It's a domino effect.
It's so powerful. I think people forget how powerful they really are.
Yeah. No, I love that. And it
Yeah.
seems too like a lot of this self-love stuff that you're talking about, there's self-care, which is like we said, face masks, yoga, all of those things. But what you're talking about, the self-care rituals that you are talking about, journaling, meditating, setting boundaries, stating your needs, fighting the people pleaser tendencies, those aren't like super, super fun things. That's not
No.
like, sitting down and lighting a candle and saying 5 nice things about yourself. I think that's what
Mhm.
a lot of people think of when they think of self-care rituals. What you were
Mhm.
talking about is doing the really nitty-gritty work of learning and understanding more about yourself and communicating that to the people around you.
Spending time in nature,
Oh,
praying, if you are,
mm-hmm.
spending time in nature is a big connection, getting grounded. Um, you it's funny because I talk about all these things, Rachel. There was a time and point that I was like, that's horseshit. That's it's so funny because like I thought of that. Like I was like, no way. That can't be it. Those simple things you're telling me that if I do these simple things that I could change my life.
I mean, there's studies showing that if you spend 5 minutes around a body of water, it can regulate your nervous system.
Absolutely. Why do you think even going to the beach,
Mm-hmm.
the water releases ions, and the ions, they produce imbalance in your life. They produce things. Nature is one of the best things you can do for yourself is you feel shitty, go to nature.
Absolutely.
Like it's such a nature was meant to heal you. It truly was. And I think people back to holistic medicines and all these things, all these ancient things, well, they're onto something, guys.
They studied it for a long time
I
for a
think that
reason.
we've
Yeah.
just lost sight in
Mm-hmm.
society of these simplicities of life. I don't think we're always grinding, right? We're always running, but we forget. It's a discipline. It's a practice. It's a consistent practice, but it's also a discipline. I don't always feel like meditating. Today I didn't feel like meditating, but did I meditate? Absolutely.
Right.
You know, because I know I've seen myself when I'm not meditated as a person, how I respond, right? And how I respond and how I react. The two separate things, and it's so different every time. Every time I meditate, I respond with calmness. I respond with my intuition, with love. I take a pause and then I respond.
Mm-hmm.
If I don't
Mm-hmm.
meditate, there's so much clutter. I always say there's too much tabs open in your brain. Too many tabs. You got to close them,
Story of my
and
life.
yeah. And I mean, you know this. So it's a spiritual care. It's a emotional and mental care, and then there's a physical care, right? Exercise, eating, all that stuff.
Absolutely.
Emotional and mental is journaling, spending time with people you love, therapy, life coaches, managing your stress, things that you fulfill you, painting, those type of things.
I love it. Well, I have one more question for you, which is if you could say one thing to somebody who is struggling with self-love, what would it be?
I would say I would say I would ask them a question, to be honest. I would
Okay.
ask them, do you feel like you're worth having self-love?
Mm.
Because I truly believe that people don't think they're worthy of love. I don't think people are worthy of having a happy life, a joyful life, a peaceful life. I think deep down there's a lot of insecurities that are blocking your own blessings.
Absolutely.
And so I would ask them, why don't you believe that you're worth the self-love?
Mm.
Because we forget that we came on this planet not as a tree, we don't have roots, we have feet. We're able to travel and move and mobility. And I also think we came back as human beings for a reason. We're here for a purpose. It's okay if you don't know that purpose. I think self-love, leaning within you, is something that you're going to find your answers in there, and stop looking for it outside of you. And you do that by doing these practices, healing your traumas. You do this by setting boundaries. You do this by being consistent, showing up for yourself, not filling someone else's cup. Filling yours first, meditating, journaling, making sure you're good. As a mother and as a woman, I saw my mom giving away things she didn't even have, and what it sacrificed her, and just not a good balanced person, because she didn't understand, of course, right? And this is back to generational curses, Rachel, where we continue to have these patterns, have these practices that we didn't know, how did this start in the first place?
Yeah.
An abusive man, right? You continue to attract abusive men in your life. Well, why?
Where does that come from?
Where does that practice come from? There's a practice there every time. For us to break those generational curses, we have to see awareness is first, and seeing where those patterns, why those, where did this start? And basically learning about your family ancestries.
Totally. Yeah, you got to go back to the beginning to figure out where it all trickled down.
Yep, absolutely.
Well, Jenny, where can people find you? On the internet, in the world?
Well, you can find me definitely on the internet. I have a podcast, Getting Your Shit Together podcast, and shit stands for self-love, healing, identity, and transformational. And I talk about all of these things and more. I talk about self-love as well. But you can also find me on social, on Instagram and TikTok. You can find me, it's called Voices of Your Soul, on Instagram and TikTok. I'm also creating a membership, Rachel, which I'm excited about. I have a self-paced course, but this membership it's something very powerful, because it's a safe space. It's a safe space for women to go there and have resources and support. And moments that we get into these negative spirals, I call them, I want people to have a place where they go and say, "Ugh, I'm feeling stuck. Maybe someone else feels this way too." And because we feel alone sometimes. Especially when going through your awakening journey, sometimes you feel alone because you're restructuring your environment, right? Your tribe. And I want people to feel connected. So look out for that. You could actually get my free guide. So if you sign up for my free guide, you'll get notified when the membership is going to be released. So yeah, that's where you guys could find me.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Jenny. I mean, like I said, this conversation really comes at the perfect time for me, and I'm sure that will be the case for many of my listeners as well. So thank you for your vulnerability and sharing, your story, and also what you learned along the way.
Thank you for having me.
Perfect. And thank you, listeners, for being here today. You have been listening to Wine, Dine, and 69. I am your host, Rachel Dalton, and let's keep talking.